Please excuse my 90-year-old rusty voice as I take you through this presentation. Before we start, let me go through a few slides explaining my background and how I came to have some knowledge about Hickory golf clubs. My name is Mel Lewis. Welcome. Most aspects of golf have been my life. The photo on this slide was taken at Braemar Country Club in Tarzana, Los Angeles. Here I'm posting scores for a charity fundraiser tournament. At Braemar, our biggest event was the Los Angeles Police Department's Parker Center tournament. Both of Braemar's 18-hole courses were used to accommodate the 368 golfers. Over 200 golf carts were needed. My greenkeeping brother is Ashley David Lewis. Together we share a long family history in golf. A wedding in 1660 was the beginning of what the famous St Andrews historian Roger McStavick called the greatest of all golf dynasties. It was the link joining the three famous golfing families of Robertson, Morris and Anderson. Of course, no 1660 wedding photos exist. This one is the oldest family photograph we have. Our father and mother, taken in 1929 in Wellington, New Zealand. We think it does the job quite nicely. The greatest of all golf dynasties. Our family tree contains many famous golfers, club makers, ball makers, and keepers of the greens. In this photo, there are four. Second from left is old Tom Morris. In the middle, holding clubs, is old Dor Anderson. Then Jamie Anderson as a boy. Third from right is Allan Robertson. An impressive group. Allan Robertson is known as the first professional golfer. In his day, there was no Open Championship. Allan died in 1859, and the first Open was in 1860 at Prestwick, with a field of only 8 professionals. The famous duo of old Tom Morris and young Tommy each won 4 Opens. Jamie Anderson won 3 consecutive Opens in 1877, 78 and again in 1879. Allan Robertson, a champion golfer and club maker. He was considered to be the primary feathery ball maker of his time. In partnership with old Tom Morris, they never lost a match, becoming known as the Invincibles. Old Tom Morris, 4 times winner of the Open Championship from 1861 through 1867. In his early days, he served his club-making apprenticeship with Allan Robertson. He's considered the first to have a modern approach to greenkeeping. At the old course, he was responsible for widening fairways, introducing teeing areas for every hole, fitting cups into holes to firm up the edges of the holes was his idea. He used clay pipes. That's when the cup size of 4 1/4 inches was established. A great course designer. Among his work, Prestwick and Murfield. Many books about this golfing legend have been written. Old Tom is truly a St Andrews legend. Tommy, the son of old Tom Morris. Today he's considered the first rock star of golf. Throughout his career, his fame extended far beyond the game. He won 4 Open Championships starting in 1868. Seen here wearing the challenge belt, After his third consecutive Open Championship win, the belt was his to keep. Replaced in 1872 with the Claret Jug, the trophy still played for today. His life had a tragic end, passing away on Christmas Day at the age of 24. The book, Tommy's Honour, written by Kevin Cook, tells his story. Our great-great-grandfather, Old Dor, was a club maker, feathery ball maker, and keeper of the greens on the old course. The famous double greens were his creation. In retirement, he could be found on the fourth hole selling ginger beer and milk to the passing golfers. Hidden in the basket was also whiskey. Drinking milk on the right of this photo is old Tom Morris. In Old Dor's honour, the fourth hole is now named the Ginger Beer Hole. Our great-great-uncle Jamie was the oldest son of Old Dor. He is the most famous of the Anderson clan, winning the Open Championship in 1877, 78, and again in 1879. At that time, it was said he was the best player in the world. Jamie was a club maker of considerable skill. Today, his beautifully crafted long-nosed woods are rare and highly sought after. Until around the year 2000, he was ranked in the top 100 golfers of all time. Our great-grandfather David started his company in 1893. It became a very successful family business, exporting thousands of golf clubs and their own St Andrews golf balls and even walking sticks around the UK, the Commonwealth, and into the booming American market. Notice the lack of machinery in this 1905 photo. Back then, handwork with simple tools was the order of the day. That's what I want to emphasize later in this presentation. It would be nice to think that today the company might be called D. Anderson and Sons and Daughter. Our grandmother was David's oldest daughter. Working in the office, she must have played a huge part in the company's success. Later in New Zealand, for my brother Ash and I, she played a big part in our upbringing. Uncle Gerald's apprenticeship in club making was served in his uncle David Anderson's St Andrews factory before 1926, in the era of Hickory shaft clubs. In New Zealand in 1934, the Anderson club making history continued when he became the professional at the St Andrews Golf Club in Hamilton. There he set up his club making workshop. It looked very much like the D. Anderson workshop shown in previous slides. In Uncle's workshop is where I served my club making apprenticeship in the early 1950s. His most famous apprentice was Bob Glading, winner of the New Zealand Open in 1946 and 1947. Uncle Jerry played in many professional tournaments around New Zealand, resigning his club position in 1955 to open a small sporting goods shop in Hamilton. Greenkeepers are the forgotten heroes of golf, the men and women who quietly care for the courses and links you play. My brother Ash was a greenkeeper for many years before he retired. He's still the most passionate one I've ever known, and still talks about how to cut fairways and greens, tend bunkers, pin placements, and how weather affects a course. With his middle name David, and remembering our great-great-grandfather Old Daw, the keeper of the greens on the old course in St Andrews, Ash will always be young Daw to me. I don't really remember having a choice regarding the occupation I would follow. In January 1950, I was sent to work as a clubmaker with my Uncle Gerald. The family wanted the Anderson line of clubmakers to continue for another generation. 5 years later, at the completion of my apprenticeship, Uncle wanted me to turn professional, but that didn't happen until 1969. Back in 1946, as a schoolboy, I had the dream of owning my own sporting goods store. I even chose Lambton Quay in Wellington as the place. After spending years working in sporting goods shops and with second jobs, by 1965 I finally had enough money saved to start looking for a shop to lease. Finding one where the famous Wellington cable car comes down into Lambton Quay. Some said I wouldn't last 3 months. 15 years later, I owned the largest sporting goods shop in the city. Thanks for letting me share our family history with you. From 1982, in the over 33 years I lived in California, in my spare time, I restored Hickories into collectors' clubs. Never kept account of how many, but it was a big number. Let's take a look at reference books. If you're an old hand at collecting hickory shaft golf clubs, or just a beginner, this first book, packed with so much information, should be in your library. The author gives outlines on many of the historical British club-making companies. There are also the names of close to 4,000 companies with dates of when and where they were in business. This book is a must-have. 359 pages packed with clique stamping, trademarks and information. If you're serious about the history of Hickory golf clubs, you need this important reference publication. As you can see, my reference books are well worn. This book, published in 2000, gives estimations of club values in US dollars in that year. To convert those values into today's US dollars, then into New Zealand dollar values, makes an interesting exercise. This 1997 publication, Antique Golf Collectibles, is full of values and photos of many historic golf items. It covers hickory clubs, antique balls, books, art, and so much more. It's worth adding to your library. This Golf Collectibles book is similar to the Antique Golf Collectibles publication. It's full of photos and drawings, along with many different items covering hickory clubs and their clique markings, antique balls, books, art, golf medals, and much more. Alec Watt is a clubmaker and golf professional. He's acknowledged as one of the world's foremost experts on antique golf clubs and equipment. This book is written in a somewhat old-fashioned way and is a joy to read. It's full of interesting information, photos, and clique stampings. A book that can be hard to find, but if you do, buy it. Look closely. In this 1905 photo, there appears to be no machinery. The staff of around 12 club makers turned out thousands of clubs that were shipped all around the world. Finished iron heads were brought in from the forges of Forgan and Gibson of Kinghorn. Shaping and finishing shafts was done using hand tools. Pulling on leather grips was all done by hand. With persimmon club heads, sole plates, bone inserts, and lead back weights were all fitted by hand. My point is, to work on antique golf clubs today, you don't have to invest in a lot of machinery. The only machinery I have is a small bench top drill, taken off its stand and mounted sideways on my workbench. I run it at the low speed of 700 RPM. That gives me all I need for buffing and polishing. Fitted with a small drill, it cleans out the rivet pinholes in a hosel. Fitted with a narrow wire brush, it helps clean out any rust inside the hosel. Over many years, all I've used are these Merit flap buffing wheels. I buy them from the Granger company in the USA, and I only use 3 grits, 80, 120, and 180. Using a 180 grit when it's worn produces a beautiful final polish. No, it's not a new idea. Friction tape was used way back in the day. Being slightly tacky on both sides, it gives great contact to the shaft and the underside of a grip. Also, an extra layer or more will increase the grip size. Here are 2 old club makers using their gripping posts to pull on leather grips with tension. It's a method that's been used from the early days of Hickory. Notice the V cut at the top of both posts. Once a whipping is wrapped onto the grip or the neck of a wood, it's rolled in the V to compress and smooth it out. I made my post in the early 1950s. It's an old friend. I've never known any other way. With the gripping post fixed in my vise, I pull about 6 meters of thread, wrap 2 or 3 loops around the post, then go to the end of the thread and start whipping. With this method, you can use a little body weight so the whipping wraps on tightly. The methods people use on YouTube, I've never seen before, and I question how tight the whippings are. A simple, effective, and easy to make piece of equipment. Both the board and the roller should be smooth and clean. Once a grip is fitted, roll it on the board to compress it and see how smooth the finish is. The other side of the board can be used for cutting and trimming grips. I let myself sit down to do this step and use a small 7-inch 180 centimetre plane. It works very well. A wrap of masking tape around the top of the hosel will help to protect the plane's blade. Then, shaping the flex area of the shaft can be done using a bastard file or, if you prefer, a spoke shave. The 10-inch bastard file. With the round back on this tool, shaping the flex area on a new Hickory shaft is a rewarding task. Turn the shaft in your fingertips to check that it stays round. To finish the process, with a small 6 centimetre by 6 centimetre square of medium grip paper in your hand, spin the shaft to remove any high points. Finish with 00 steel wool and you're ready to stain. Shaping the flex area of a Hickory shaft has been done with a spoke shave for many years, but the 10-inch bastard file is the method I prefer. Try both tools and use the one you prefer. To bring old hickory shafts back to life, using this knife with a new blade, scrape away the grime and years of wear. Lightly work the blade back and forth along the shaft to get down to clean hickory. Finish by spinning the shaft in your fingers while holding a small square of medium grip paper. Finish with 00 steel wool and you're ready to stain. When the stain on your shaft is dry, the way I suggest you finish it is by applying a mixture of linseed oil and mineral turps. The mixture should be 100% linseed to 50% mineral turps. The number of coats you rub on with a rag will depend on the condition of the shaft, usually between 6 and 8. After the last coat is somewhat dry, rubbing the shaft clean with a paper towel is my preferred method. Job done. A traditional finish is achieved. The way persimmon heads were finished way back in the day was French polishing. I learned how to French polish in 1950 before we changed to a more modern method. French polishing is a long process, and anyway, I've forgotten how to do it. Now I use the same way I finish hickory shafts. Hickory is such a beautiful wood to work with. In the raw, the grain tends not to show, so way back in the day, the club makers rubbed tar or pitch into the grain to highlight it. Today, because these materials are somewhat hard to find, my modern day solution is to use a black wood filler, watered down and rubbed into the grain. Then the shaft will become completely black. When dry, scrape the black off down to the wood using the finishing processes shown in previous slides. Now the hickory shaft's grain will be beautifully highlighted. This is the jig I use whenever there's a shaft to straighten. The method works very well. With a badly bent shaft, you will have to go through the process a few times. To better understand how it works, on YouTube there are 2 or 3 videos showing the jig being used and the tools needed to do the work. It seems there are 2 schools of thought. Some say leave the antique hickory the way it's aged over the years, rusty, perhaps with a bent shaft, and damaged or no grip. I'm sure I know what great-grandfather David would have said. Mel, bring the club back to as close as possible to the way it was when it was new. In his honour, that's what I always try to do. I admire the people who are so enthusiastic about hickory golf and club restoration. Many post videos on YouTube showing the different ways they work on their 100-year-old clubs. All these videos are by people who are self-taught. Some videos are quite good, others not so good. Be selective on what you choose to copy. Because I live at Riversdale Beach in the Wairarapa, when I restore a forged iron head to collector's quality, the sea air is a problem. Rust starts coming back inside 24 hours. So when a head is finished to my liking, the modern day solution is spray 3 light coats onto the head with this magic CRC clear zinc. The coating will not stand up to play, but for a collector's trophy club, it's perfect. I'm sure if you could ask any of my club making ancestors about swing weighting, you might get, what's that? I can tell you, even in the 1950s, we would pick up clubs to compare their balance and feel. No doubt the Hickory craftsmen did the same. Now, in more modern times, swing weighting has become a standard in club making. I've been involved in OEM production of clubs, where every head, shaft and even grip is weighed and matched to within 1 gram. That's modern club making. That's when swing weighting really works. The set of scales shown here are the ones I used back in the 1950s. We had never heard of swing weighting. I believe they are the same type of scales used 100 years ago in the era of Hickory. In my uncle's workshop, the iron heads we used were imported from the forge of Forgan and Son. They were rusty and rough and needed a lot of grinding and polishing to find the correct head weights. The next slide shows the weight for both woods and iron heads in a standard set of men's clubs. These two charts show weight increases from a persimmon number 1 wood and a polished number 2 iron head. We worked in ounces. Here, for your convenience, I've included matching gram weights. There was little thought about the very important part of golf club making 100 plus years ago. It was the engineering workshops where metal stamps were formed for stamping cleek marks into hand-forged heads. Once the cleek stamp design was created, a stamp was made. Over time, when the stamp had been used perhaps thousands of times, it became blunt and needed replacing. At that point, perhaps it was the club maker who wanted the stamp updated, so a newer version was made. Look at the George Nickel Company, where over the years from 1898 through to the steel shaft era, as many as 13 of their open hand cleek stampings, all of slightly different design, were used. In 1954, I was given the responsibility of making designs for my uncle's new line of Royal Scot clubs and the large number stamps for the sole plates of the new model woods. The photo on this slide shows the results. Note the custom-built metal stamp on the right, showing the lettering is in reverse. All cleek stamps were made in reverse. In my Uncle Jerry's workshop, we did have an old lathe. On that we did 2 jobs. One side was for drilling through the neck of a persimmon wood head to fit a shaft. On the outside of the lathe was a drum sander for shaping the head. The deep face driver shown on this slide was a very new concept back in the early 1950s. It started its journey on that old lathe. Then a sole plate, lead backweight and face insert were all fitted with simple hand tools, a fine-tooth saw, chisel and small file. The second photo shows a very fine-tooth saw I have owned for 70 plus years. It's used to cut face lines into the face of a wood, starting with a pencil line drawn on the face in the correct position for the first saw cut to be made. Next, with a metal scribe, and I've lost mine, about 18 centimeters long with sharp points at 4 millimeters apart, all the face lines are scribed, positioning where each face line is to be cut. The result is shown on this head. Check my website for 3 blogs about equipment that should interest you. On the top menu bar, find blog. From that drop-down menu, select equipment, There you will find 3 blogs listed on this slide. Also, if you're interested in raising money for your favourite charity, this book about charity fundraising through golf, Golf Tournaments 101 2nd edition, is full of ideas, ready-to-use files and fundraising suggestions. My publication is available on Amazon. Finally, I will always try to help you with your Hickory Club restorations. So, contact me through my email. Thanks for watching. Wishing you fairways and greens and putts that drop.